Well, hello there. Hope everybody's having a great day. It's Thursday, January 15th, Martin Luther King's birthday, 2026. And this is episode number 4. We are on the 4th episode of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. I am Dave, Nerd Emperor, and I will be your host again today, as always. Thanks for tuning in. We're growing. Please help us spread the word. Help me increase my numbers to qualify for a sponsor. So please listen. If you stay engaged for a while, the numbers will start to show up. Keep listening because today in particular, I got to talk about something that was so awful that it gave me an upset stomach and PTSD. So we'll get into that shortly. It's something so bad it's comical, but it's also a crying freaking shame. But we'll talk about that momentarily. I want to let everybody know now that we are not just on Spotify where we got our start. We're on Amazon, we're on Audible, we're on iHeartRadio as well, if you use those. Others are coming soon. Hopefully by this time tomorrow, the podcast will also be porting over to YouTube. It's a matter of getting permission set up and having IDs verified and all this bunch of rigmarole to get their so-called advanced privileges so that you can go on YouTube and they can censor you and give you strikes for arbitrary or non-existent reasons. I'm really looking forward to getting onto YouTube so that I can probably get kicked off of it for Lord only knows what. But it's also being ported over to our Patreon page, which isn't fully set up yet. We haven't monetized the Patreon page. It is patreon.com. That's patreon.com/WSP Dragons, as in War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons. So check us out there as well. We'll start in with the regular news headlines, and this one isn't a news headline. This is me trying to help explain part of why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling today. You ever have one of those days? Yeah, I'm having one of those days. And my day began at 1:30. 1:30 this morning. I woke up. I fell asleep around 10 o'clock last night and woke up at 1:30 in the morning. Could not go back to sleep. And by 4 o'clock, I just said, heck with it. I'm staying up. And I ended up playing Magic the Gathering, playing the app called Magic Arena on my phone for a couple of hours. Then I went onto YouTube to poke around as the wife started getting ready for her job and noticed something that I'll tell you about later. And then that took up an hour and a half of my time this morning. So insomnia, the other white meat, that's what I've been chewing on this morning. And I'm kind of dragging. So I'm going to, and I don't mean the flying fire breathing kind. I'm not fully there today. So we're hoping to get through this with minimal bloodshed. But the major news headline that I want to start with first, really, amazingly enough, it didn't affect me and the missus, but it affected almost everyone we know. Over the last couple of days, it's happened. A major cell network outage hit Verizon yesterday in particular. Over the last couple of days, there had been some issues with spotty reception, but yesterday it became acute. And according to reports, now the reports, I'm going to just go ahead and flat out say they're way wrong, way low. But the Verizon outage that happened, if you had a Verizon cell phone, odds are you had problems with it yesterday. It seemed like almost everyone that had a Verizon phone did. My wife at her work, people were coming in saying, hey, is your phone working? Mine's on SOS mode. Because and that's an iPhone thing. I don't know if that happens on Androids. We use iPhones. And on an iPhone, if you don't have signal to your cell carrier, it will go into SOS mode, which is basically you can call 911, but you can't call anyone else. And you have significant limitations in data usage. Pretty much you can't, you got to find Wi-Fi somewhere so that you can do anything, like use your apps or even, I think, send text messages. We are fortunate, though, even though there were reported issues with T-Mobile and AT&T, from what I'm reading online is that it's not the companies outside of Verizon. It's not AT&T and T-Mobile per se. The problem was people on AT&T and on T-Mobile were attempting to reach Verizon subscribers, and since the Verizon network was down, the calls couldn't be completed, and people were mistakenly saying that their network, there being AT&T and T-Mobile among others, were down. But amazingly, this didn't happen to my wife and I because, to their credit, and I'm going to give them props right now, they are not our sponsors. I wish they would be. That'd be awesome. I'm hoping to get a sponsor soon. But we're on Cricket. We pay, I forget how much it is a month, but we've got our phones on Cricket, and we have not had an issue of late. There was a time a couple of weeks ago where for about a half an hour, I was in the middle of a phone call with my best friend, and the phone call got dropped, and the phone went into SOS mode. And for a half hour, I had nothing. I tried turning the phone off and on again. That didn't resolve it. But eventually, it just kind of self-corrected, so maybe they were working on something on the network. I was of the impression, though, that almost all the cellular providers use largely the same network and the same number of towers. And if you live in a rural area, that's going to be more true than if you live in an urban area, because there simply aren't as many towers. So a lot of companies will piggyback off of one another in those situations. But looking at a report from, Mashable.com, Verizon has acknowledged that there were network issues as some mobile customers reported phones going into SOS mode. This reported by Chance Townsend with Mashable yesterday afternoon. But T-Mobile issued a statement on X Twitter. We're going to call that from now on, we're going to call it Twix. So there's our little Seinfeld in-joke. If you ever hear me talk about being on Twix, it's not the candy bar. It's on Twitter, now known as X. The person that I first heard call it that is a guy whom I have a lot of respect for in the podcasting world. He's also a heck of a rock and roll guy, is Phil Labonte, who's the front man for the band All That Remains. And he's on the Tim Pool podcast a lot. I heard him refer to it as Twix, and I immediately took a liking to it and to him because I thought it was a great thing. Plus, he's a counter-revolutionary, and he is a great guy and very smart and very, very fun to watch, very entertaining. Plus, he can rock, so that's always a benefit. But yeah, Verizon outage with storage restored. Here's everything that's happening so far according to TechRadar.com. Verizon outage service restored after a quote-unquote software issue. Here's everything we know and how the $20 credit will work. So they're offering customers a $20 credit, which gives them kudos considering how much they overcharge people for using their network. Because Verizon might be the biggest, but in our experience, and we've used 4 different cell providers, Verizon was far and away the most expensive of the providers that we had. There was a time when my wife worked at a local hospital in the lab, and she got a 20% discount for Verizon for being an employee of the University of Maryland medical system. And even with the 20% discount, 4 phone lines and the data plans that went with them came to over $320 a month. That's almost a car payment. So Verizon giving back $20 per customer, they can afford it. They can afford it. So that's where we stand right now. It looks like the outage is fixed. It lasted for about 10 hours, according to these people, and impacted hundreds of thousands of people. But I got to tell you right now, I went online last night and looked at the outage map, and it was massive. It looked like the entire southern United States. You couldn't drive along any of the interstates without going from one outage zone into another outage zone. So for them to say hundreds of thousands of people impacted, yeah, I mean, I guess technically 5 million people is hundreds of thousands, but it's 1,000. So take it with a grain of salt. I think Verizon is blowing a little bit of smoke on that, but we'll just agree to disagree on it. Speaking of communications, we're going to go from regular news kind of into the war section, leaving the politics and news section, going into the war part. We're going to talk about Starlink now, which is the internet provider from everybody's best friend, Elon Musk. The man behind, he was one of the founders of PayPal. Of course, we know him from Tesla, we know him from SpaceX, and of course he bought Twix back in 2022, paid $44 billion, and it's widely considered to be the best purchase in business history in terms of its effect on American society, in my opinion at least, because I think him purchasing Twitter helped save free speech in America. But we'll discuss that maybe some other time. It did. It really did, because the inmates weren't running the asylum anymore. And immediately upon him taking over the company, he kept it as efficient as it was, despite getting rid of around 80% of its staff. So that should tell you, there was a lot of fiddling and farting around going on over at Twitter, and there wasn't a lot of actual productivity happening. But then you have a real business, a committed businessman come in and streamline it and get rid of the crap and the unnecessary censorship. Now, there's still a great deal of censorship on Twix, don't get me wrong. There is still a great deal of censorship on there. I've been a victim of it myself. I tried starting up a podcast about, a month ago, and one of the trial balloons that I put up was I created a Twitter account and did a Spaces Live on Twitter, and I think I was on for about 45 minutes. As that posted, I realized, oh crap, I forgot to talk about such and such. Well, I open up another Spaces to start another episode, and bang, my account got suspended. Brand new account that I verified the phone number on and everything got suspended for what they called inauthentic activity. And I got to level with you, I laughed my butt off about that, because there are so many spam bots and ad bots and porn bots on Twix that for them to say video, there was 45 minutes of video of me sitting at my place talking about stuff, riffing on different subjects, just, to try out the system to see how Spaces worked. For them to say it was inauthentic, I'm thinking, wow. I'm one thing I'd like to think I'm not is inauthentic. I wasn't just irritated, I was highly offended. And I sent them quite an interesting nastygram during the appeals process. I basically abandoned that account and created the new one for this podcast. And on Twitter, you can find us. We are at the WSPD podcast. But now I can't link my phone number to the new account because it's still linked to the old one, even though I deleted it. But before I deleted it, I logged on to delete it, and they showed me that it had been reinstated. So whoever read the nastygram must have, said, oh gosh, what have we done? And unscrewed their screw up. So halfway props to Twix. If they hadn't been hidebound with their stupid automation and algorithms in the first place, we wouldn't have had the issue. But I'm not relying heavily on Twix for it. I'm glad that it's there, but as I've said before, I don't like social media. And granted, podcasting is kind of a form of social media too. But the true social media outlets, the micro-blogging sites like Facebook and Twix and Instagram, and especially that flaming garbage heap called TikTok, can't stand most of what's on there. But that's neither here nor there. So talking about Starlink, that's where I digress. Sorry to get off topic, but I'm a grumpy old man, I ramble. Starlink has been made available for free to people in Iran. Now, this is, of course, 19 days now into the protests that had begun against the Islamo-fascist regime there. And it's free, but it kind of comes at a price. And here's what has happened is at least one large shipment of Starlink devices, whether it's laptops, routers, phones, equipment, whatever it is they're using for Starlink to be used in Iran, got intercepted by the Iranian government. And here's the BBC article about it. Starlink reportedly made free in Iran, but protesters are taking huge risks by using it. This was reported yesterday evening by Rhea Kansara and Ganche Habibzadeh. Starlink has reportedly waived monthly subscription payments for users inside Iran after the government shut down the internet last Thursday, so a week ago today, cutting off millions of people from their families' livelihoods and access to information during a deadly crackdown on protests. The satellite technology has become a vital communications lifeline for some of those in the country trying to tell the outside world what's been happening on the ground in recent days. Two people in Iran told BBC Persian their device was running on Tuesday night, even though they had not been keeping up with subscription payments. The director of an organization that helps Iranians get online also told BBCP that Starlink had been made free. The BBC has approached SpaceX to confirm its waive the fee, but they have yet to respond. However, if you're not paying for something that has a fee and you're still getting it, then there's a good chance something's changed. However, here's the rub, and this is where the true price of Starlink comes in, and it's the true price of using any internet communication over there, apparently, because there's still some major issues with the IRGC and their control over communications. Using the service in Iran carries a punishment of up to 2 years in prison, and authorities have reportedly been searching for Starlink dishes to stop people from connecting to the internet. According to the source they quoted, they're going onto rooftops and checking the surrounding buildings. Okay, I'm not naming the source because the person that they quote went by a name that they said wasn't their real name. So there's no point in me naming this source. But that person spoke to BBC Persian using a Starlink connection. And what this man also said was, what people need to know is that the government is searching areas where a lot of footage has come out, so they need to be even more cautious. The device operates like a mobile phone mast in space, using a constellation of satellites to communicate with small dishes on the ground with a built-in Wi-Fi router. But the device is costly and beyond the means of many in Iran, so making it free may lead to its wider use. Well, hell, making anything free may lead to its wider use, unless, we're talking about food. Food is becoming more expensive here in America because apparently, thanks to what we've learned about food stamps and whatnot, 14% of the country get food for free. So when 1 out of 7 people doesn't have to pay for food, the other 6 are going to be footing the bill. So if you wonder why the cost of your cheeseburgers and your milk and not milk because milk's heavily federally subsidized, but basically everything else you buy has gone up so much in the last 4 years, then that might have something to do with it. So those of you that might be upset about Trump cutting food stamps and this and that, I can understand that there are needy people, and there was a time when our family was on food stamps, and it was actually fairly recent. But look at all the fraud going on with Minnesota, and imagine, do you really think that if it's fraudulent daycare, that they're not also defrauding people in other ways too? Fraud is a huge industry. It's a Fortune 100 company. So think about that. But speaking to Al Jazeera TV, now I'm not a fan of Al Jazeera because it's basically the official news outlet of Islamo terrorism. Okay, it's jihadi TV. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi, and I don't care if I say his name right because he's part of the ruling fascists there, and screw him, said that the internet had been cut off, quote, after we confronted terrorist operations and realized orders were coming from outside the country, unquote. Terrorists who are unarmed and peacefully demonstrating. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this sounds like the kind of crap we heard about January 6th. We won't get into that, though. Iran's Fars news agency, which is affiliated with the the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I called it the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Council the other day, so forgive me for getting that wrong. So we'll just call it the Islamo-Nazis. Claimed internet restrictions were imposed to stop foreign social media platforms such as WhatsApp and Instagram being used, quote, to organize violence and unrest. Because I know if I want to overthrow a government, I'm checking Instagram first. This is a great idea, guys. This right here is the sign of a country with command and control spiraling out of control. So I sincerely hope that we do have a regime change take place in Iran because these people are absolute scum. And I can't stand people making disingenuous comments, which is why I'm trying not to heavily invest myself in modern American politics, because you can't get a politician to admit the sky is blue anymore. You just can't. There's always some kind of a spin to it, and I don't have a lot of time for that kind of nonsense. I like calling out BS, but the problem is, if I wrote down all the BS that I heard in modern American politics, I would get carpal tunnel within a week, and I wouldn't be able to use my writing hand. But anyway, back to the story about Starlink. Human rights groups have condemned the blanket blackout as an abuse of power, and a spokesperson for the UN's Human Rights Office. Oh boy. Iran currently sits on the United Nations Council for Human Rights. Okay? So let's talk about how useless the United Nations is in that regard. But anyway, a spokesperson for the UN's Human Rights Office told the BBC the shutdown impacts the works of those documenting human rights violations. So the UN is basically speaking out of both sides of its face. Okay, remember, back during the Iraq War in 2003, Iraq was sitting on the UN committee that was responsible for its own disarmament. Libya, under Muammar Gaddafi, which had myriad human rights abuses, was chair at one point due to the way the random rotation of chairmanships happened. They were the chair of the Human Rights Commission. Okay? That's like putting Hitler in charge of selling yarmulkes. You don't do it. But the UN does it. You know why? Because the UN is basically an American-funded, anti-American, anti-Israeli debating society. They don't really accomplish a whole heck of a lot. They have their moments, but remember, like my grandfather used to say, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Just make sure you don't set your watch by it. So, anyway, that's what the UN's human rights people are saying about it. So far, one human rights group has confirmed, though, the killing of more than 2,400 protesters during the unrest, as well as almost 150 people affiliated with security forces, although these numbers are believed to be much higher. I have actually heard numbers in the tens of thousands, but hearing them and having them confirmed by a legitimate organization, I'm not too fond of doing. So we have, a reputable source confirming 2,400 people have been murdered by the IRGC, by the Iranian government in one capacity or another, but whether it's, local police and militias or whether it's the military. And that is a sad and shameful thing. And again, all you hear from the Democratic Party is crickets, because they're too busy trying to deify a woman who tried to run over a law enforcement officer in Minnesota and got perished because of it. We've already discussed that. We won't be going into it any farther. Now, it's difficult, according to this article from BBC, to gauge the true scale of bloodshed because, like other international news organizations, they're not able to report from inside the country. Gee, that sounds almost like Ukraine, which nationalized its news media, as I said. Guys, I'm beating this drum over and over again. And people need to listen up. People need to pay attention. When the government is in control of information, do you really think they're going to say anything that makes themselves look bad? Even the Trump administration. Every presidential administration, though, truth be told, but let's be honest, every administration in the U.S. has always portrayed itself as doing a great job. It's just that the news media here has only been adversarial towards one political party, by and large, for the last 90 years. But we'll leave it at that. So big doings in Iran, and of course there has been some scuttlebutt. The rumble on the jungle drums that I've heard is that Trump was talking about intervening. He has said help is on the way on Truth Social. That's a quote of one of his truths on Truth Social, which is, of course, the equivalent of a tweet on Twix. Sorry, I just opened the wrong window. I was playing Wordle. I don't know if anybody else plays Wordle on the New York Times website. I got it in 4 guesses today. I won't tell you what the word was. I don't want to ruin it for you. Chasm. Sorry, I can't help it. I'm just sarcastic as can be. In addition, talking about Iranian unrest, one final note is that yesterday, Saudi Arabia's government announced that if the United States was going to launch airstrikes against the Iranian regime, that U.S. forces were not permitted to overfly Saudi Arabia to use their airspace while en route to making such strikes. Anybody who's a student of history can remember this happened in a vaguely similar way 40 years ago and has happened since. Back in the 1980s, when Ronald Reagan's administration, this was, I want to say 1986, there was, I believe, a nightclub bombing in Germany that got tied to the Libyan government. And in response, the Americans launched an air raid against the Gaddafi compound in Tripoli, the capital of Libya, there on the Mediterranean Sea. And I think we may have killed one of his children, his son. But in so doing, the F-111s and other planes that were involved in that strike were denied permission to use French and Spanish airspace to fly from their bases, I think they were in Britain, to Libya to conduct the strikes, which meant that the planes had to fly for an extra several thousand miles. I want to say it was about a 4,000-mile detour. And it involved several tank toppings because they would mid-air refuel. So that was a very long flight for the guys flying the Aardvarks and the Wild Weasels and the other strike aircraft that day back in 1986. It draws a parallel to me in that regard. And the common conception is the French aren't exactly trustworthy and potent in war anymore. And that's largely due to their performance in 1940 against the Germans, and then in Indochina in the 50s. But we won't get into that. That's too deep a rabbit hole. I don't want to push myself down into. But I'm just saying it draws a little bit of a parallel. But that said, Saudi Arabia has made that decision, and we'll see what happens as a result. Moving on to sports, NASCAR. I was talking to my good buddy and former coworker Dustin Holt today. Hope you're listening out there, Dustin. I've been telling you to, man. You got to pay attention. We were talking about stuff this morning on the phone that I had actually gone over in the podcast. So pay attention. Pay attention, buddy. So there are some huge changes for NASCAR reported by Yahoo Sports. NASCAR changes playoff format again as it reverts back to the original 10-race chase format. And this has been the big news this week. It broke on Monday, but I've been too busy talking about the NFL and ragging on the WNBA, which I'm going to do again today, to mention this. But NASCAR's sanctioning body announced Monday that it was returning to its original postseason roots, according to Nick Bromberg, senior writer for Yahoo Sports, and getting rid of the multi-round format it had used since 2014. And I can say that, now I'm only a casual observer of the NASCAR thing. Dustin is a dyed-in-the-wool NASCAR fanatic. When we worked at the paper a couple times a year, he would take the entire day, get his credentialing done, and would go up to Dover, Delaware, to the Monster Mile and cover the races that were held at Dover, because there were 2 NASCAR races at Dover, Delaware every year at the Speedway. And he was like a kid in a candy store when he was there, because his day would start at like 3 a.m. He would get ready at his home and then drive up, hour plus here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland to Dover, and then, get his car parked, get situated, grab all of his necessary credentialing while he was there, and then he would go start talking with drivers and crew members and this and that person, taking tons of photos. And Dustin's a great photographer, by the way. He actually taught me a couple of things about the camera that I was using my last few years at the paper, and made me a better photographer as a result. Thank you, Dustin, by the way, for the tips about ISO. It really helped. He taught me basically how to take photos at night at high school sporting events. Now, granted, like a football game on a Friday night, they have lights at the stadium, but if you don't know how to set your camera properly and you try to use a flash, or you go without one without the proper settings, your photos are going to suck. Well, he showed me how to get the settings just right and how to take basically photos in the dark. And so I give him a lot of props for that. But basically, here's how it works in 2026 for NASCAR. The top 16 drivers through the first 26 races, because it's a 36-week schedule, will compete in the 10-race postseason. The driver with the most points over the final 10 will win the championship. Now, NASCAR first implemented the Chase in 2004. Before that, the Cup Series had basically been determined by whoever earned more points over the entirety of the season. The format from 2014 through last year eliminated 4 drivers in each of the first three-race rounds, and then the final 4 drivers would then race heads up for the championship in the final race of the season. So this makes it, to me, it makes it a little bit more interesting. In 2025, Kyle Larson used a 2-tire pit stop during the last caution to get off pit road first among the contenders and win his second Cup title. He did not lead a single lap during the final race as Denny Hamlin dominated it, but found himself behind Larson thanks to a 4-tire pit ahead of the 2-lap sprint to the finish. So that was the extra, 7 to 8 seconds that he saved. When you're moving at 150 miles per hour, that's around 215 feet per second. That 7 to 8 seconds is an extra quarter mile. So that made a difference of a quarter mile of travel by choosing just to get, I think he got outside rubber. I don't remember. Dustin would be able to tell you, but my guess, just mathematically speaking, would be outside rubber because the outside rubber wears more. And that's the tires that face the outside of the track, just for those of you that don't know. But if you don't know what outside rubber is, then you're probably not paying attention to me talking about NASCAR anyway. But in the previous format, drivers who won a race during the regular season were guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, which sounds good in theory, but I don't know. I mean, that's like saying that in the NFL, a team that beat the Super Bowl champs automatically got into the playoffs, and they might suck and go 1-16. So, it's 6 in one hand, square root of 36 in the other. But I'm kind of preferring the new format myself. Now, the top 16 drivers in the point standings after the first 26 races will make the playoff field, regardless of wins, and then playoff points no longer exist. Drivers will receive a base level of 55 points for winning a race instead of 40 before stage points are added in, and the driver who finishes first in the standings over the first 26 races will start the playoffs with 25 more points than the guy in second place. So that is a point standing equivalent, basically, of being put in the pole position. So that's a boost. That's worth half a race, basically. So that definitely matters. The number 1 seed will start the postseason with 2,100 points. The scale will slide down to 2,000 for the last driver in the playoff field. And a 100-point difference is significant, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't be doing it. Let's look at it that way. If 2 drivers are tied at the end of the playoffs, their number of wins and, if necessary, second place finishes will serve as the primary tiebreakers. So winning still does matter, thank goodness. But there's a cumulative effect too. And I can tell you right now, if you do like, Jeff Gordon did a couple years in the 90s where you're winning 6 or 8 races a year, then, or more, then, points are kind of going to be moot because you're just downright dominating. But we'll see how it plays out. I think it's going to play out better, and I think it's going to be a better way of doing it. I like this system over what had been done recently, and we'll just leave it at that. So in that regard, congratulations to NASCAR, because I think they made the right decision. I do. I think they made the right decision in that regard. And now, drum roll please, news from the sports league nobody watches. Yesterday, the WNBA Owners and Players Union have agreed. Oh God, this is just my uninformed layman's take on things, because I didn't cover WNBA. We covered, when I worked at the paper, almost all youth sports. We didn't do a lot of pro stuff. But I can tell you this. The WNBA and the WNBA PA, the Players Association, recently agreed to a moratorium on free agency. Okay, what that means is, let's say you've got player A from the champion team. Okay. And I follow the WNBA very little. I don't even remember who won it last year. Okay. And that's part of the problem, is it's not in people's collective memory because it's not a fun sport to watch played. The NBA is vastly better, as I've said. This is basically 2 hours of perpetually angry women missing layups. And even the people that claim to be ardent supporters can't name players on the teams. I asked my best friend to name 3 players, and he named a couple players, and he said, I only know of this one because this one got into an argument with that one. And then I remembered this one because this one got into a problem with being arrested in Russia for drug possession. So that's the only reason he knew the names of 3 WNBA players, but I don't think he knew the names of 4. Anyway, 3 months after the end of the 2025 season, it reports Alexa Philippou from ESPN.com, the WNBA and Women's National Basketball Players Association remain at an impasse as they work toward a new collective bargain agreement, or CBA. The deadline for this was January 9th. Okay, that was, I think, last Friday. It's come and gone, no deal, no extension. And the 2026 season doesn't begin until May. But, and this is similar to what happened in Major League Baseball in one regard in 1994 to 95, you can't just end a strike one day and immediately go back to playing the game. There's, practice, warm-ups, preseason, camps, and so on and so forth. In the case of WNBA, there is an off-season league that the players are participating in, or about to participate in. I think it's the second one of the year. And according to this article, the distance, quote, between both parties was plenty apparent at last week's deadline. In a statement, the Players Association accused the WNBA of, quote, failing to meet us at the table with the same spirit and seriousness, unquote, and, quote, jeopardizing the livelihoods of players and the trust and investment of fans, all in the name of preserving regressive provisions that no longer belong in women's basketball. On deadline day, a large inflatable rat, long a symbol of labor protests, was displayed in front of the NBA store in New York. Yay. Okay. It's kind of a vicious cycle that the WNBA is in now, because if there ends up being a work stoppage, which I think right now the way it stands would be in the form of a lockout by the owners, it's only going to do more damage to a league that's already been losing money for 30 years. So, I gotta tell you, I wish you luck. But for a moratorium on free agency, let's go back to that real quick and talk about what that actually means. If you have an active free agent market, and again, we'll use the example of Major League Baseball, what does free agency actually imply is that there are talented players whose contracts have ended, and that makes them free agents. That means they are no longer beholden to a given team. They are on the open market, by and large, and other teams are allowed to bid for the contract for that person, like when Johnny Damon was playing with the Red Sox and his contract expired, he ended up, I think, going to the Yankees. There was a little bit of bidding involved there. There were, the Yankees called his agent and the Red Sox called his agent, and they were making offers and making counteroffers, and eventually this free agent outfielder for the Red Sox wound up wearing pinstripes. Well, if you impose a moratorium on that, that means that, to me, not only are you not having bidding wars on players, it means there's a reason that you're not having a bidding war on players. They don't do anything without a reason. And remember, the WNBA is a business. And let me remind you of Inslee's Law of Business. Okay, that's my last name. Congratulations, you know who I am now. 10 words, real simple. All business decisions at their core are financial in nature. Okay? Every decision a business makes, whether it's hairnet policy at McDonald's, whether it's deciding to put a moratorium on free agency in the WNBA, whether it's the size of the handicap parking spaces at Walmart, whatever the case may be, there is somewhere in the chain of custody of that issue, there is someone who decided that this decision being made this way would benefit the business better. So, yes, owners aren't going to be keen on having free agency because it will imply that they have to bid and spend more money on a player. But if the players' union agrees to it too, that means there won't be any free agency, and the players whom the union represents will not be able to get more money. They will be stuck kind of in this, what they're referring to as the status quo situation. And if you can't have a bidding war on top talent, that implies that you're not capable of it because you're not making enough money. And as I've said, the WNBA has been hemorrhaging money for quite some time. In my entire life, I've never heard of such a thing happening. This is a sign of a league that isn't making money because if the league was profitable, the players would have leverage enough to prevent it. Right? Free agency means bidding wars on good players. This is the opposite. As I said before, they are WNBA, the NBA subsidized, unwatchable stepsister of the NBA. Nobody wants to watch the WNBA because it just isn't a good sport to enjoy. Okay? Let's take a wild guess, a stab in the dark, as to which sports in America are the biggest draws in order of total attendance. Well, Major League Baseball, then NFL football, then NBA basketball, that's the men's league, then NHL hockey. Then after that, I would say it's probably soccer, men's soccer in particular. And then beyond that, there's a significant drop-off between each of those five. Okay, because the typical small market Major League Baseball team, even if they're only pulling in 20,000 people in a 50,000 seat stadium, that's still 1.6 million people in attendance every year. Okay, teams like the Chicago Cubs, the Dodgers, the Yankees are pulling in 3.5, maybe close to 4 million, depending on how well the team does during the year and the size of the venue. For instance, Fenway Park does not have the seating in Boston for the Red Sox that other parks have, but other parks don't have the Red Sox. So the trade-off is the Red Sox sell out a whole lot of their games, but seating is a little more limited than bigger venues that don't sell out. Baltimore, on the other hand, is considered a small market team, and they're in the middle/low end. This year they were more toward the lower end of the range of the 15 teams in the American League, and they've not been a consistently great draw. So I'll make a ballpark guess right now and say that the Orioles are going to go 71-91 this coming year. We'll see how it pans out on the first weekend in October. We'll revisit this statement and see what I said and see where we stand. But WNBA, I got to give the players credit. They got guts. They've got guts to ask for a new CBA that gives them more than they're already getting. I really do. You know, numbers are up, but numbers are up in the context of a league that had pitifully few viewers, now still has pitifully few viewers, but slightly more. So there has been an uptick, but it's not on the scale of the NBA. And for anyone to argue that a WNBA player deserves to be paid what an NBA player is making, I got to level with you. You need a drug test. Okay? You simply do. If you look at the amount of revenue brought in, and I tell you what I'll do is sometime next week when I revisit the WNBA thing, because I'm guessing that talks will still be stalled, and if they're not, we'll talk about that in the podcast too. I will go ahead and look up the revenue figures for the NBA, but the NBA is a multi-billion-dollar sport. The WNBA is a multi-million-dollar corporate welfare case, as I've said. But enough ragging on the WNBA. I actually want them to succeed, but they just don't have the product. They just don't. And that's the way that is. Now, this is going to get rough, and I got to try to keep this brief because I'm trying to keep the podcast to around an hour. We're 44 minutes in now, and I only have a couple of quick things after this. Star Trek. For those of you who are like me, lifelong Star Trek nerd, you may have heard that Starfleet Academy, the newest Star Trek show, premiered today. Or maybe it was at midnight last night. Here's the thing. The show premiered for free on Netflix. Every other Star Trek show that has premiered since streaming became big has premiered behind what's called a paywall. What that means is when Star Trek Discovery came out, when Star Trek Picard came out, when Star Trek Section 47, I think it was called, came out, Lower Decks, all of these shows were on a service that was a paid streaming service. Starfleet Academy has premiered for free on Netflix. Just so you understand the implications of this, the only other show that I can think of that premiered for free on Netflix in the last few years was Cobra Kai. And you know why it premiered for free on Netflix? Was because for the first 2 seasons, Cobra Kai was a Netflix production before, or not for free on Netflix, I'm sorry. Let me restart that. Why did it appear for free on YouTube? Was because Cobra Kai was a free production on YouTube due to it being a YouTube-produced product. It was a YouTube's house organ. And then Netflix bought them out after a couple of years. And then the other 4 seasons, and season 5 wasn't great, and season 6 was downright forgettable. I wouldn't even bother, really, with season 6 of Cobra Kai. It just, no, it was bad. But, unfortunately, Starfleet Academy, which premiered last night on YouTube for free. Oh God, where do I start? Like I said, it doesn't strike me that Paramount's terribly confident that they're going to do well with the show if they're giving away episodes. Businesses can't operate in a vacuum. They're not like the federal government giving stuff away and able to lose money on it. Okay? For Paramount to give away the pilot of a new TV show in an era where everybody pays to watch every show in one form or another, whether you're paying for a cable package or you're buying streaming services or whatever the case may be, it's not a good sign. And it actually fits with everything that's happened with Starfleet Academy's pre-release, what's the word I'm looking for? Controversy, because basically, I haven't seen a review of the Starfleet Academy premiere before its official premiere from the people who get the advanced looks. I didn't see a single review that was mostly positive. I'm not talking about one that was entirely positive. I'm talking about one that was just saying it was better than average. And this morning, after my wife left for her job, I turned it on. Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I have never in my life thought such horrid thoughts about network studio executives as I did when I got finished watching the premiere of Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Where do I begin? Okay, first, this is going to sound sexist, but I don't care, because what they did was sexist. Apparently, judging by what I saw in terms of the cast, there are no female fitness standards anymore in Starfleet. And I say that because looking at the female cast members, a large portion of them were obese. The reason I say that and make that an issue is because when you look at the male cast members, none of them were, except perhaps for the character played by Robert Picardo, who's 145 frickin' years old and is rehashing a character from 30 years ago, the emergency medical hologram, the digital doctor, basically, the computer doctor from Star Trek Voyager, which premiered, I believe, in 1994 or 95. It was one of those 2 years. Apparently, Robert Picardo is utterly penniless because he signed on for this show. It's awful for him to have to revive that character again, because the character appeared not just in Voyager, but it appeared in a Star Trek Next Generation movie, as I recall, and also appeared in other series. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to ask why nobody else from prior series signed on for this one. At least no significant actors, even as a hologram. My guess is they couldn't get anyone to sign on, so they said, screw it, let's move the timeline ahead to a time where every person from every other Star Trek, anything that we've ever done, has been dead for decades. That way they don't have to worry about those entanglements. Instead, what they did was, in the scene where the cadets are welcomed into the academy, they flash all of the different names of the characters from classic shows of the past, like Christopher Pike and Spock. You know, they've got those names flying around the screen just to try to dwell up happy memories for the older fans like myself. It didn't work. Now, I've always thought that modern science fiction, say from the last 30 years, was kind of a playground for lazy writers, because you can just excuse anything you do that's stupid or scientifically impossible by just saying, it's science fiction. Okay, here's an example. In the movie Thank You for Smoking, starring Aaron Eckhart, where he played a lobbyist for the tobacco industry, there was a scene where he discussed trying to get Brad Pitt to sign off to get paid, I think, $1 million to smoke a cigarette in a scene in a sci-fi movie. One of the problems was he didn't want to do it. But one of the problems with that scene in and of itself was that the scene was taking place on board a spaceship. And what people seem not to realize, so in theory, they probably could have gotten away with it had he done it without having to explain this away in this manner. But the way Aaron Eckhart described it was, remember, starships, spaceships, their atmosphere for the people inside them is pure oxygen. You can't smoke in pure oxygen. You're going to start a massive fire. Think about what happened aboard the capsule for Apollo 1 on the launch pad in 1967. A small spark from an electrical fire in a control panel, I think at the feet of the 3 astronauts, blew up out of control in a matter of seconds and created so much pressure that they couldn't open the door to the capsule to escape, because the door was configured to pull in and slide to the side in order for them to get out. So they ended up cooking the poor 3 guys inside of the capsule and died. So it led to a redesign of the door so that it opened outward, for one thing. But the way that Aaron Eckhart explained it, to get back to that point, was what they would do is, yeah, he's smoking a cigarette, but they would explain it away by throwing out some nonsense jargon that such and such was invented that allows you to smoke while you're on a spaceship to get around the whole oxygen thing. Okay, that's what I mean when I say lazy writers. That they'll just throw out, since we invented the pressure compensator and the oxygen deflammabilizer, you can smoke a cigarette in outer space now. That's why I'm having a Lucky Strike, or whatever brand they were trying to promote. The problem is this show, Starfleet Academy, the impression I got from the jump, from the start of the show, was that it was made by people who weren't just lazy writers, but they don't like Star Trek. It just, we'll get into the premise and some of the scenes in a minute. They name drop famous characters to try to evoke that nostalgia. It didn't really work, but here's my second least favorite thing about it. One of the students at Starfleet Academy, one of the cadets, is a hologram. In Star Trek, in the lore, in the show, the holographic doctor is a computerized person. Okay, he is a projection of a person, and he's basically, what a hologram is in Star Trek is it's a glorified computer program. So why, I must ask, Why would a computer program need to learn the basics of being a Starfleet officer? Did they somehow, in the 26th or whatever century they've jumped ahead to now, did they somehow forget how to program a computer? Again, lazy writing, and it's stupid, and they're trying to sound edgy, and it just comes off as being, it's pathetic. It's truly pathetic. Okay? I can understand the argument that, yes, the Starfleet cadet may encounter new things when they're out and about in the galaxy exploring strange new worlds and meeting new life and new civilizations and boldly going where no one has gone before. But to get to the point where you're an ensign starting in Starfleet, getting through Academy is moot if you're a computer program. Because all of the crap that you're going to learn as a cadet at the Academy, they can just program into this hologram. How is this even a thing? The holographic cadet is absolutely absurd. It was just absurd. Just a stupid premise. In the show, the EMH doctor is a glorified babysitter. There's a scene where the male lead, basically, from the show and another male character are about to get into a physical altercation, and suddenly the holographic doctor appears out of thin air, because he's a hologram, so that's how they appear anyway, and says, "What's going on? Why is everybody such and such a level so high? Why are you being belligerent? Everybody calm down and behave yourselves and go about your business." Stupid. It was absolutely stupid. Why would that's the kind of police state thinking that you just didn't need to put in. They're trying to establish some kind of a precedent there, I guess. I don't know, but it was just absurd. My least favorite thing was the obese girl boss who is I think the president of the Academy. They refer to her as Cadet Master, who is a Klingon Jem'Hadar half-breed. Okay. This one made my brain hurt. I think it actually gave me brain swelling from this. I almost had a stroke. The Klingons are a warrior race bred for war, basically. That's all they do. Their entire economy and civilization is predicated on conflict, military action, conquest, fighting, and dying. Okay? The Jem'Hadar, interchangeably kind of used with the term the Dominion, are from one of the series of Star Trek called Deep Space Nine. Okay, first you had Star Trek original series in the 60s, then you had Next Generation starting in 1987, and then around 1991, 93, maybe it was, you had Deep Space Nine, which was set on a space station that the Federation of Star Trek, the good guy organization, had taken over from an alien race known as the Cardassians. The Cardassians, not to be confused with the Kardashians, those worthless tramps who have $1 billion fashion empire who've accomplished nothing except being the offspring of a man who was a friend of murderer O.J. Simpson. The Cardassians are an evil reptilian race, and the Jem'Hadar, the Dominion people, were so bad when they came into our area of space, our quadrant of the galaxy from another quadrant, they were so formidable and so tough to deal with that the Cardassians and the Federation actually struck an alliance of convenience to fight them. So why are Klingons and Jem'Hadar off humping in the woods? I don't understand that. Not to mention that the Jem'Hadar were addicted to a certain type of drug that they had to have very regularly or else they would frickin' die. We won't discuss any of that because, as we all know, nobody who's hooked on drugs ever has a baby who's hooked on drugs, right? But again, it's science fiction, and that's the excuse. I'm sorry, but even science fiction, you're stretching credibility and believability. You just get a little bit too far afield in that. But it's such a bunch of woke garbage. I actually hit the dislike button on the show 10 minutes in, and at least 7 or 8 times during the course of this 76-minute show, I was almost thankful for the commercial interruptions because the Tide ads were more interesting. And I'm not even the one that buys the detergent in the house, but I am the one that does the laundry because the wife does the majority of the work outside the home, so I'm trying to do the work inside the home. During this 76-minute show, I think I checked the timer bar on it 7 or 8 times thinking, my God, is this over yet? It's bad, guys. It's just bad. They took the timeline, they moved it ahead a couple hundred years. That way they didn't have to burden themselves with actually knowing what they're talking about, learning the lore. The franchise is in its 60th year, and quite honestly, they've butchered it. Okay? Final thought on this. I'm trying to cut this short. I got rambling again. But imagine... Okay, well, let me put it to you this way. Have you noticed I haven't named any of the characters except for the EMH Doctor, and that's because he was in a previous show? That's because they're not memorable. I didn't realize until after I looked it up that the incredibly aged and very rough-looking woman who played the captain of the starship Athena, that's the focal ship of the show, was actually Holly Hunter. I didn't realize that until after I looked it up. I kind of recognized her, but she looked like 400 feet of bad road. They didn't bother to come near her hair with a hairbrush. I don't know what happened if the makeup artists were on strike, but she looked horrible. And I grant you, she was born in 1958. She's 67 going on 68 years of age, but she didn't have to look it. She actually looked like an alcoholic in her 40s who had prematurely aged because of all the liquor, because they did such a terrible job on her hair and makeup. Absolute terrible job, and a disservice to Holly Hunter, who's a good actress, and I've loved her stuff over the years. But here's the thing that I like the least about it. Picture a Klingon male who's so lame he probably cries when he mates, okay? He's the kind of guy that gets in a huff when the Wi-Fi goes down. Performing emergency surgery on a mortally wounded half-breed female Gem Hadar without significant medical training. Okay? There's a scene where the girl boss cadet master has a large cumbersome object embedded in her right side of her torso, and this Klingon dude who acts like a whiny little beta male has to perform emergency surgery without a surgical suite worthy of the name, without any proper assistance, except the holographic cadet standing over his shoulder. And she says, oh, by the way, her heart is in such and such a place, because the anatomy of a Gem Hadar and a Klingon is a little different than that of a human, right? The fact that he had no medical knowledge is proven by her saying that, because he would have said, I know this. Because Klingons don't like being corrected. Apparently this one loves being pushed around. But the plot has more holes in it than O.J. Simpson's Alibi. Okay? The show is so bad it left poop stains around the edges of my flat screen TV. That is the comment I left on the show's YouTube comment video page. It's bad. It's bad, guys. Stay away from it. All right? Trying to sum this up quickly, George Carlin once joked that they should make Miss America contestants who lose keep coming back until they won. Okay? Now imagine a woman who's a 41-time loser, how she might look in a spandex bodysuit with her hair locked into place by that Knox gelatin conglomeration used by synchronized swimmers, twirling a baton talking about world peace. Okay? It's akin to that. The show is a train wreck. But it's not all bad. They did, to their credit, throw in a whole bunch of foul language in a vain attempt to look hip. They had characters calling each other a-hole. A-hole 1 to a-hole 2. Yeah, that's quality. That's cinema, man. That's art. To wrap this up, Starfleet Academy is so bad, I'm surprised that Ed Wood didn't direct it. Okay, from Plan 9, from Outer Space fame. Yeah, it's bad. It's so unworthy of a place in the franchise. Guys, I can't even find another insult. like Lloyd Bridges said in the movie Airplane, I picked a bad day to stop sniffing glue. I'm telling you, it won't appeal to older fans. And the reason is I'm an older fan, and I had to muscle my way past the gag reflex for shows like Discovery and Picard, and we won't even discuss the cartoon. So I know of what I speak, okay? I am the stereotypical middle-aged Star Trek fan. I've followed the show for my entire life since I became cognizant of it in elementary school. Okay? I remember in 1982 watching The Wrath of Khan on Showtime when we had just gotten cable the previous year when we were living over in Little Hurlock, Maryland. And that really sparked my interest in Star Trek in particular. I had already been reading, stuff like Robert Heinlein and Philip K. Dick, but really got into Star Trek in particular watching Star Trek II. So that fed my interest in the original series, and then when I was in high school, Next Generation premiered my senior year, and I stayed a Star Trek fan. I can no longer say I'm a Star Trek fan. It's driven me completely away from the franchise. It's terrible. It won't appeal to younger fans. Well, younger fans aren't stupid, but I don't think it's going to appeal to them. The comments page on YouTube was hilarious. People were calling it Star Trek: The Search for Mom because the premise of the main character's story arc is that he was separated from his mother when he was 5 years old. We won't mention that they were separated because she got hauled off to prison for something, and he broke out of the detention facility at the tender age of, the character looked like he was about 5 years old, by stealing someone's communicator badge, hacking into the force field system that functioned as a window to the room that he was in, shutting down the force field, jumping out the window and running away on a planet with winds and a climate that was about as hospitable as that of Jupiter. Okay? Those of you that remember what SETI Alpha 5 looked like when they found Khan and his people in Star Trek II, that's the environment that this small child escaped into, and the premise that you get from watching the show is that he's been on the run his entire life and that they somehow didn't find him when he was 5. I may have read that wrong, but... And he's so incredibly knowledgeable about everything. He knows computers, and he knows starship piloting, and he knows this, and he knows that, and he can override stuff, and he can hack systems, and all this. Why is he even in Starfleet Academy if he knows so much? Just give him a starship. Surely he can do better than the lispy, alcoholic old captain that Holly Hunter got paid to portray. I don't know if she got overpaid or underpaid. I'll leave that up to you and to myself later on to speculate. It was bad. Guys, it was bad. It was just bad. Here endeth the rant. I'm going to try not to vomit. I trust eating a Chipotle bowl and not being within 5 hours of a toilet more than I trust that this show is going to improve. Okay? Starfleet Academy is the sci-fi equivalent of 3-day-old gas station sushi. Do not touch it. It will mess you up. Done. Moving on. We're going to change gears now. We're going to wrap things up. I got 5 minutes, and then we're going to be done. Joke time. This one's real quick. Got to tell this joke. It just came up in my mental Rolodex. I did a YouTube video on it, did a short, and I had a friend come over the other night. He was really, really drunk. I let him spend the night at my house. He wakes me up at 4:30 in the morning after coming in at 2 o'clock, drunk as a skunk. Dude, there's something wrong with your toilet. Okay, so half asleep, I stagger down to the other end of the house and look at the toilet, and the toilet looks fine. The water in it's fresh, there's no mess, there's no overflow. I flush it, it works fine. I look at my friend, I go, what's the problem? Well, I don't know, man, but when I went and peed in the toilet earlier and I hit the flusher handle, the daggone thing kicked me in the shins. It did what? It hit me in the shins, both shins. I hit the handle, and it hit me in both of my shins. Get out, I said. What do you mean? I said, get out of my house. I don't care if you're drunk. You're going to go to sleep in the car. Give me your keys. You're going to go sleep in your car. Go sleep in your car because you just peed in my recliner. That's the end of the joke. Okay. Now for an installment of anecdotal evidence. I had a couple people tell me that they really enjoyed the story that I told about the drunk at Doc's Quick Shop where I worked in 1987. Well, this is the story about the crash at Doc's Quick Shop in 1987. This happened, I want to say it was the weekend after July 4th weekend of 1987. I'm working at a convenience store in Cambridge, Maryland, which sits with a parking lot that connects directly to US Route 50 westbound. You can pull out of the westbound lane and come right into the parking lot. You could cross Route 50 at that point before they changed the road a little bit and put up those little plastic barrier poles to prevent you from doing it. But you could come off of eastbound, make a left-hand turn, and pull right into the parking lot of Doc's Quick Shop at the time. So I'm working at Doc's Quick Shop. It's a Saturday afternoon because all the fun stuff happened on Saturday afternoon. No, I'm sorry. My mistake. This was a Sunday. This was a Sunday because we were bombed with westbound traffic. Because with the weekend being over, all the tourists were headed back to Annapolis and Baltimore and Pennsylvania. My God, I think half of the state of Pennsylvania goes to Ocean City, Maryland every weekend in the summer. Tons of Pennsylvania tags. So apparently there's nothing to do in Pennsylvania. I guess Hershey Park, the Phillies and the Pirates just aren't going to get it done for you in the summertime. 2 cars pull into the parking lot as I'm outside dumping one of the trash cans. And these people get out, and at first I can't understand what they're saying. Have you ever turned on a radio and for the first 7 or 8 seconds, the words come out, the lyrics are just noise, that they're incoherent, they don't make sense, and then finally your translator in your brain kicks in, and you go, oh, okay, that's such and such a song by so-and-so. Well, in this case, I couldn't understand what they were saying because for the first few seconds, I didn't twig to the fact that they were speaking Spanish. Okay, now I had just finished my junior year in high school where I had just finished my first year of French, but it had come after taking 2 years of Spanish. I took Spanish as a freshman. I took Spanish as a sophomore, 1 and 2. I took French 1 as a junior, French 2 as a senior. So by the time I graduated high school on May 31st, 1988, from good old North Dorchester High, home of the Eagles, love you guys. Haven't seen the new school yet. Will soon. I knew enough French and Spanish and English to get a hotel room, to get food for the night, or to get my face slapped just about anywhere on earth. Okay, so I had a very limited, functional, basic, entry-level understanding of Spanish. Spanish can be very difficult to learn if you're not the type of person who wants to spend a ton of time learning how to conjugate different verb tenses. Spanish is a quagmire of verb tenses. We'll just leave it at that. So I'm listening to them talking. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's Spanish. Okay. I'm listening, and I walk over, and I made the mistake of asking a question. ¿Qué pasó? I asked. What happened? Well, I look, and the front license plate of both cars are these really weird-looking license plate. They're partly red and they're partly blue, and the number pattern isn't similar to what we have in Maryland, and they're weird. And then I look, and at the top and bottom, it says Special Diplomat or something like that. They were diplomatic license plates. Now, I asked what happened, and 4 different people, 3 guys and a girl, come up to me and start flinging Spanish at me at 400 words a minute. And I had to say, alto, lo siento, pero mi español es muy fundamental. Mi español es muy mal. Momentito, no tan rápido. Basically, I'm sorry, my Spanish is very fundamental. It's not very good. Not so fast. And one of them, thankfully, spoke more English than I spoke Spanish. There had been a crash. The one diplomatic car from El Salvador had run into the other diplomatic car from Belize. These are both countries in Central America. And nobody was seriously going to need a helicopter to fly him to shock trauma hurt, but they were dinged up. I think one guy actually had a broken ankle. And long and short of it, me in broken Spanish, that other guy in broken English, the El Salvadoran fellow, we're trying to figure out, what can be done and so on and so forth. So I run back into the store and tell my coworker Mark, because we worked a lot of weekends together, dude, I need you to call an ambulance. There's been an accident. There's a guy out here that's hurt his leg, and so on and so forth. Well, for 15 minutes, I didn't know who had even caused the wreck. I, to this day, don't even remember which car caused it, but one of them hit the other one, and the guy had his foot jammed up underneath the dashboard and had broken his ankle or something. They had an ambulance out, and long and short of it is the second time it is the second time and final time of all the incidents that took place at that Doc's Quick Shop during the 6 months that I worked there where somebody gave me money for helping them out. The guy gave me $20 for trying to help him out with the situation with everybody being dinged up from this car crash. And I never did, of course, get the resolution to it. Plus, when you have people who are diplomats and they work for a foreign embassy, they usually have diplomatic immunity. And what diplomatic immunity means is if you're in another nation, you can get away with a lot of crimes and misdemeanors and traffic violations without any significant legal repercussions. I don't know how that applies to two entities, two different people from two different countries who both have diplomatic immunity. But I'm sure that I don't recall El Salvador and Belize going to war in the late 1980s, so I guess it didn't escalate. But yeah, that was the crash at the Quick Shop. It had happened not far up the road when the one car, it was like a Honda Civic, pulled into the parking lot. The front bumper fell off. Oh man, it was comical and a tiny bit frightening, and I was horribly embarrassed because you know what they say. What do you call somebody who speaks 3 languages? You call them trilingual. What do you call somebody that speaks 2 languages? You call them bilingual. What do you call somebody that speaks 1 language? You call them an American. And that's part of why I wanted to learn more than 1 language, was because I wanted to see the world. And I've seen a good portion of it, so... That day, I got to see a tidbit from 2 countries that I still have yet to visit, but I do know this much. If I go to El Salvador or Belize, I'm wearing my frickin' seatbelt, and you should too. And we'll just leave it at that. Folks, we're going to wrap this up. Again, please follow my podcast. Please give me a 5-star rating. Help me get my numbers up. I'm doing what I can here. I'm basically using 2 old iPhones and a beat-up $100 Chrome laptop that has less active memory than a 25-year-old computer. It's a very small processor, and I don't have a lot of computing power, and I don't have the software suite that allows me to do certain things with the podcast to spruce it up. So help me get, my numbers up so I can get a sponsor, get some tech upgrades. If you want to help in the meantime, you're obviously able to do that. You can donate this way through Cash App. My Cash App is $WSPD pod, WSPD POD. Help us get some better tech. I would definitely appreciate it. If you can't understand, times are tough, but I'm trying to do this to reach a broader base, and then I won't have to ask you guys to help me out. I can reciprocate down the road. Also, as I said, we're in the process of getting this set up. It's now broadcast not just on Spotify. We're on Apple. We're on Audible. We're on iHeartRadio. It's on the Patreon page. Again, that's patreon.com/WSP Dragons. Check us out there. You can get on there and join up for free and get all the free content that's on there. Right now, it's just the podcast and one map that I made for tabletop role-playing games. But there's going to be more. I've got a lot going on here between show prep and making the podcast and setting up socials. There aren't enough hours in the day. That's probably part of why I didn't sleep a lot last night. The Twitter handle, again, is the WSPD podcast, THEWSPD PODCAST, the WSPD podcast. Follow me there. YouTube is also the WSPD podcast. Just look in the search box on YouTube for War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons, and you will find me right there. So check us out, get on board, start with the ground up, start with us from the ground up. We got other socials coming soon. Hold on, let me give you my Instagram account name as well, because we got on IG, and we're going to have some stuff coming on there as well. And that is the WSPD Pod. So that's very simple too. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate you coming on this long. This is, I think, the longest episode now at about an hour 20. It's a minute or two longer, I think, than the previous. Or no, we're a minute and a half shorter than number 2. I'm sorry I got a little bit above myself on the Star Trek thing, but I'm a fan and I feel betrayed. It's like dating that hot chick for all those years and then finding out that she actually likes short guys with bad hair who drive cars that don't run. Because that's basically what Star Trek has abandoned its fans for. It's bad. It's bad. Stay away from Starfleet Academy. Final warning. Don't come at me telling me you watched it and liked it, because I'm going to doubt your sanity. I'm serious. Anyway, good luck to the WNBA getting their crap together. I love what NASCAR has done. I hope things get straight in Iran. We'll talk more about Trump and Greenland tomorrow. We didn't have time today, but we're going to wrap up. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day. And again, please subscribe. Please follow. Click like. I've got a poll going up. Vote on the poll. Interact. Let's get these numbers up so that we can get this thing noticed more widely. There are a lot of people I think that are going to enjoy it, but they have to know about it first. Take care. Have a great day.